Hello everyone, we are going to be looking at the new 2020 AP United States History Modified DBQ test that is going to be given in May of this year. The AP Board and College Board have redesigned this test to be a more adequate take-home version, online version that should be a test that we will be able to pass. So what we're going to do, we're going to be going through what the changes are, and then what you need to do to get a 3 on this test at the very minimum. Of course, a lot of you guys are going to want to get into the 4s and the 5s on these tests, and of course, you're going to have to do a little bit extra to do that. But we're going to be starting with just what do you need to do just to basically get a 3 on the test, get a pass, and then getting college credit for most colleges with that 3. Again, the College Board has been in close proximity and close connection with the College Board, making sure these tests will count for college credit this year. And again, this is something they've been working through to be very equitable and accessible to all AP students. So let's get started right away. Okay, so what's going to happen is the AP and the College Board decided that pretty much when this coronavirus, school closures, shelter at home came into place, most AP classes were up to World War II. And so they were going to stop all content after World War II. So basically, everything could be covered from periods 1, which was the Native Americans and Spanish colonization, all the way through period 7, which is the end of World War II. Anything after World War II will not be required on the test. Of course, anything used in synthesis or context could be used on this test and still receive credit, but you will not be forced to understand any material after World War II. That's one thing. Second thing is that most likely, it's going to be in the years from 1754 through 1945. Most likely, the period 2, which is 1607 through 1754, will not be covered. Typically, that is not a coverable period on the DBQ in past years. So far, we have not heard direct word about that. There is some stipulation or some aspect of maybe the College Board got that wrong because there's a couple different conflicting viewpoints. So we'll get into that as more information comes out on if period 2 will be coverable in this time period. So let's get into the last 5-year tests. Last year, there was a DBQ on the progressive era. So most likely, you're probably not going to get a progressive era test this year. 2 years ago, it was imperialism. So again, probably you're not going to get a DBQ right around the early 1900s to the late 1800s. Most likely, you're not going to get one covering imperialism progressive era. Revolutionary War was 3 years ago. What basically about the Revolutionary War made it revolutionary. And you definitely aren't going to get either of these first 2 ones about women's rights or the rise of conservatism, because you see they both fall outside of the period 7-8 time period. So again, most likely you're not going to get something from the early 1900s, and you're probably not going to get a Revolutionary War DBQ, which means most likely, again, this is not a direct quote, but most likely the DBQ will fall in the 1800s is my guess. Again, please still prepare yourself for that pre-1800 stuff, and still prepare yourself for the Great Depression and 1920s and New Deal and World War II, because again, there may be DBQ on that time period. But again, just looking at process elimination, most likely you will see a DBQ from the 1800s on this year's test. Again, but it is not a for sure. Okay, so what are the changes on this test compared to previous years? First thing, the biggest change is an at-home test. It's online, at home. The AP and College Board has spent millions of dollars to rework this version for security issues and to make sure that this at-home test was going to still count for college credits. Since it's an at-home test, this will be an open note test. That's really important to know. But it will be a timed test still. So you can't just go into these endless Google searches about information. I would highly advise a grouping of documents that you have prepared prior to this test to have in front of you to help you through this test in regards to evidence and extension. I will give you a couple of the examples at the very end of this lecture or in this tutorial about what you should have and what you should not have. I would not have your textbook. I would not have open-ended Google searches, but I would have some refined materials to really help guide you on some stuff. But remember, you only have a certain number of minutes to write this essay. But at the same time, this is a really big one. There is absolutely no collaboration with other students or, of course, any other teachers. The AP and the College Board has put in some plagiarism and other tools to really look out for redundancies and other types of things that may think that 2 or 3 or 4 students are all collaborating and have very similar answers. So we're really going to look out for that. And also, all these tests will be sent back to your home teacher, which is me, and we'll be able to look at those also. So again, I really plead you guys, don't collaborate with other students, but have a plan going to place prior to this test. Another change, this will be a 45-minute DBQ, which means it's going to be 15 minutes shorter than the typical DBQ of 60 minutes. With that being said, you need to have a plan of action. There will be less documents, only 5 compared to 7, but you still need to have a plan of action for writing a shorter version DBQ. You'll have 5 minutes to upload the secure test, and then you'll have 45 minutes to write this test. This test may be written in pen and then taken a photo of, or you may type the essay and submit it. I would highly recommend in the weeks to come that you have a plan in place. Are you going to write this test because you're quicker with writing, or are you going to type it? If you're not quick with typing, don't try to learn how to type very fast right now. You will not have the time to speed up your typing if you're a slow typer. Write it, take a photo of it, upload it. It's a much easier process. If you're a whiz at typing, go for it. Type to your heart's content. Okay, this DBQ will only have 5 documents rather than 7. So it's going to be a condensed version, which means there'll probably be 3 documents that are supporting or more in favorable of a prompt, and 2 documents that are sort of contradictory, typically is how it goes. That's probably most likely. And there's going to be a new scale or rubric. They're adding 3 points to the previous 7-point scale. And we'll go through all those to 10 points and what is added to that previous 7-point scale. Okay, here's the updated rubric. It is a scale of 10 points, 3 new points added. Here's the most likely score breakdown to get an AP score of your choice. Again, this is not directly from the AP College Board yet. This is just what we think as AP teachers. So most likely, again, don't quote me on this, but most likely to get a score of a 5 on the AP test, you must get a DBQ score of a 9 or a 10. You must get 9 or 10 of the rubric points. To get a score of 4, you must get a DBQ grade of either 7 or 8. To get a score of 3, which is a DBQ score of 5 or 6, and who really cares about 1 or 2? These are both not passing grades, so let's not even consider ourselves getting a 3, 4, 1, 2, or 0. Okay, so this is going to be the category that most of you are going to fall into. This is the category that I'm going to really focus and push you guys on to get at least a 5 or a 6 to get your passing score. Of course, many of my class and many other across the country are going to be really striving for those 4s and 5s, and that's awesome. Keep up your good work. Keep pushing yourself to get those really nice writing scores. But for the bulk of the students, we're going to want to really push to get that score of a 3, which means a DBQ grade of 5 or 6. Okay, that's really key important. Okay, now let's look at the rubric that the AP sent out to all AP teachers and all students, and you have access to. Again, all AP tests have been modified, so you're going to want to make sure whatever AP class you're in, you're going to want to look at the AP rubric that the College Board sent out to really hone in your skills on what is needed to pass these tests. Okay, the first thing, the first 2 points are exactly the same. No changes, no differences. The same processes of looking at things are going to be exactly the same. To get your thesis point It's a 1-point thesis. You must answer the whole prompt with historically defensible claim or thesis and a line of reasoning behind it. That means you have to show some argumentation, and you must include the whole prompt within your thesis. Again, not just restating it, but the whole aspect of the prompt. Same thing. Again, in your first paragraph, we're also wanting to see contextualization. Typically, looking at the broader historical contents that is relevant to the prompt that typically happens right before the time period of the prompt or right after the time period of the prompt, and in some cases, during the time period of the prompt. Again, these points have not changed whatsoever for the new redesigned DBQ. In dealing with evidence for this second part of the rubric, there was an added 2 points compared to previous years. Here are the 2 points that were added. Okay, so 1 point, this is going to be modified. So you have to use the context of at least 2 documents to address the topic of the prompt. Typically that's going to be 3, but you only need to use 2 for this point. So to earn 1 point, the response must accurately describe rather than simply quote the content from at least 2 of the 5 documents. So that means you just have to basically use a document, describe it within the context of the prompt. Again, that was lowered down to only 2 documents rather than 3. Then, to get 2 points for using the documents to support an argument. Okay, here's where it's different. So the AP added this one right here. Support an argument in response to the prompt using 2 documents. So to get this point, you only need to support your 2020 argument using 2 different documents to get this point, rather than the previous arguments of last year's. Also, you get a second point if you use 4 documents. So if you want to use 4 different documents on this test, all but 1, you get a second point. And this were basically the same as last year. Last year and the previous years, you had to use 6 of the 7 documents, and this year you have to use 4 of the 5 documents. But they're adding another point right here if you support and use 2 documents to support your prompt and to support your argumentation. So that's a new one. Okay, the second part of evidence is evidence beyond the documents, or as I call it, the 8th document. Well, here, this would be the 6th and the 7th document. Okay, so the AP did use at least 1 piece of evidence, of the specific historical evidence beyond what's found in the documents and relevant to the argument about the prompt. And you have to treat this the same way as sort of a document. You have to basically write the evidence, you have to expand on the evidence and connect it to why that supports your argument. And that's 1 point. What the AP and the College Board did this year, they are adding a second piece of evidence to be added into this DBQ. So for 2020 only, this point will be awarded for a student who uses the second piece of outside evidence in their response. So this is a great way to get a secondary piece of evidence in your writing, and then again, utilize it, explain it, and then connect it to your argumentation and how that supports your prompt. So again, another point. The last second of the rubric is analysis and reasoning. Slight change on this one. Okay, for this one, this is what we call the POV plus. This is where you have to use artist or author's point of view. You have to use the audience. You could use the purpose, or you can use historical context to deal with the documentation. So to get 1 point, in the previous years, you would have to use 3 of the documents to do this. For this year, you only have to use 1 document. So for 1 document, explain how the NY, the document's point of view, purpose, historical situation or context, and audience is relevant to the argument. Again, this is called the POV plus. So you have to do this for 1 document. To get a second point here, you can do this for a second document explaining, again, the artist's or the author's point of view, the purpose, historical situation, or audience for the second document. Again, for the 2020 only, 1 point will be awarded for students who provide sourcing of 1 document relevant to an argument, rather than the 3 of the 7 documents as required in typical exam years. And a second point will be awarded for the providing a sourcing for a second document. And the last one, this is the complex understanding, this kick-ass essay point. This is exactly the same as previous years. This is a very hard point to earn. There's ways to get this point that you can sort of, jimmy up and rig a little bit. But again, this is a tough point. For most of you, I'd recommend not even trying this in the time period that you will have. But for some of you, again, it's the same way. You can show synthesis, basically confirm the validity of cooperating multiple perspective across themes or across time periods. You can show this looking at similarities and differences, basically, or continuity and change, or multiple causes. You can also qualify or modify an argument by looking at 2 different pieces of evidence or 2 different conflicting arguments. Or you can just have a huge amount of nuance within your essay, huge amount of outside evidence, huge amount of support and documentation and argumentation in your essay, and just having a really great essay can gain you that point also. But again, if you haven't been able to master this throughout the course of the year, I would highly advise looking at other ways to get your 6 points to get your 3 on the AP test. Okay, this rubric is Tom Ritchie's rubric, one of great AP teachers that really puts out a lot of information to help. He has great weekly videos and great videos that you can also use to supplement the things that I'm going to be doing for you. You should recognize this. We've used this in class several times. And what this is, here are the changes. Here are the changes that we're going to go over here. So for this change, the supports, basically describe 2 documents, you get your point right there. So this one right there, describe 2 documents, get your point, rather than the normal 3. For this right here, documents support arguments, you get 2 documents that support arguments, you get 1 point. Documents support 4 arguments, 4 docs, you get 1 point here. For this one right there, this is your POV plus, author's point of view, audience, purpose, or historical context. For 1 document, you get a point. You use a second document, you get a second point. And for outside evidence right there, if you use 1 piece of outside evidence, you get 1 point. If you use a second piece of outside evidence, you get a second point right there. So there's how you get your 10 points. Now let's go through this. How do I get the 6 points that you need to do well in this AP test? Okay, so there's 3 strategies to get a 3 on this test. Of course, a lot of you are going to be looking for the 4s and 5s. This is geared to the bulk of the students that want to pass this AP test this year, getting a 3. Okay, the first thing is outside heavy evidence. So outside evidence heavy without context. That is the contextualization at the start of your DBQ. So here's the 6 points you really need to focus on. First, always focus on the thesis. This is an easy point to get. Basically, look at the prompt, make sure you know the whole prompt, what it's asking you. Answer the whole prompt in your own words, including basic argumentation or basically a reasoning of where you're going with your prompt. That should be a guaranteed point right there. That's point 1. Okay, here's point 2. Describe 2 of the 5 documents in this essay in regards to your prompt. Again, it's recommended that you use at least 3 documents just in case you mess up on 1. So try to do all 5, but again, describe at least 3 documents in case you mess up to get the second point. Okay, this is the one that most people can do. Support your argument, to support your thesis using 2 of the documents. This gets you that 3rd point. Again, you have to have connection. You have to talk about what the document does, describe it, and then you have to have another sentence or 2 directly linking that document to your argument. You must make the connection between the document that you're describing and then using that description to sort of talk about how that document supports your argument that connects to the prompt itself. You must have 2, but as AP teachers we know students make mistakes. It's recommended that you have at least 3 just in case you make a mistake on 1 of the 5 documents that is there. For this one, for a lot of you, you may not have time to do it all with all 4. Those of you who really want to push for a 4 or a 5 on the AP test, you're going to want to support your argument with 4 documents. Of course, the recommended would be 5 here. Then, point of view. You want to use the point of view plus, that means the point of view of the author, the audience, the purpose, or the historical situation for one document. You want to look at one of those 5 documents and what do I know about the author here? What do I know about the historical situation or context to support this document? What do I know about the audience or the purpose of this document? And you must state that in a separate sentence along with your argumentation and the description. That's where you get point number 4. And then here's where the easy one is. You have material in front of you. You have your knowledge of this whole course. Use 2 pieces of evidence, 1 piece of outside evidence for point 1. Use a second piece of outside evidence for point 2. Remember, you got to treat these outside evidences almost like a document itself. Connect or basically bring up the outside evidence, explain what the outside evidence is, and then use a couple sentences to support that evidence, connecting it to your argument. And that is a outside evidence heavy, without context, way to get a 6, which would guarantee you at least a 3 on the AP test. Again, we think that maybe a 5 would do it too, but again, we want to be safe and looking for get your 6 points to guarantee you a 3. Okay, another way to do it. This is outside evidence heavy with context. Again, this is a lot of you have mastered this contextualization, so go with it. Start your essay off with a strong piece of contextualization that happens right before the time period of the prompt and builds into the prompt. So what is some big historical context that builds before the prompt itself and connect it? Again, of course, have your thesis. Accurately describe 2 documents. Again, recommended 3. Support your argument with 2 documents. Recommended is 3. And then you're not even looking at point of view. A lot of you guys have not mastered the point of view plus. You don't know how to incorporate that fluidly into your essay. So just skip it and focus on contextualization and still have 2 pieces of outside evidence to get you those 5th and 6th points. So that's another way to get your 6-point essay. Again, we're completely foregoing this complex understanding for most of you, and we're completely foregoing the strong supporting argument, and we're completely foregoing the second point of view on the second document. And the last one. This is probably the toughest, I think. If you know very little about history and you're working with just what you have in front of you and you don't have a huge amount of background knowledge, a huge grasp of the subject matter, this is probably the way you have to go to get your 6. Again, you're not going to probably be able to do contextualization, and you may be stumped on outside evidence. Again, you should have some resources in front of you, but again, if you're really stumbling or having a hard time grasping, this is probably the way you're going to go. You're going to have, of course, a strong thesis that builds off the prompt, that answers the whole prompt with reasoning or that early argumentation. You're going to describe 2 documents, recommended is 3. You're going to support your documents with arguments, and then you're going to have the POV plus for both documents, and that's going to be there. Hopefully that will make sense. We're going to continue with that. Also, a couple of pieces of outside evidence that would work great for this would absolutely be using this, which is basically a guide that has all the different key vocabulary throughout this class. I'll have this submitted for you guys to use. You may, of course, use the timeline that we've been working on. That'd be a great piece of evidence and great piece of documentation to have right next to you when you're writing this DBQ. Another great thing is, I love this, is the drive for a 5. I'll download this also, so you have this ability to look at all these different points of evidence to use on your essay. And the last thing, if it's going to be a political essay, this is a great thing to use, is this one right here. This is basically a history of all the political parties and their major ideology. So this is a great thing to have handy if it is a political essay talking about the political aspects of a time period or change or the connections there. Okay, I hope this helps. We'll get into it with a schedule starting next week. We're going to be looking at different periods of time with a DBQ practice for every single time period from here to the AP test. Stay in touch, stay safe, and we'll talk to you during the next post. Bye, everyone.